Of course, talking about computer network security would not be complete if we did not discuss about wireless security, since it's becoming the prominent way that we're accessing networks nowadays. So it's a very difficult question to answer if wireless can ever be a secure medium. We're using a lot of third-party software. There's a large ecosystem of devices that are using wireless. It's a completely open medium. And more and more attacks are coming up to play. For example, if you thought that WPA is completely safe, think again. Google the details about the crack attack that breaks even WPA authentication. The prevalent protocol for wireless communication is 802.11, as you may have heard, and there's two frequencies, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. If you tinker with your router's settings, you will see those different settings. And there's also channels, because we're all sharing a medium, like, I'm sitting here at home, sharing this medium with my neighbors. So our routers are trying to distribute us to share this medium in kind of different locations. Think about the channels like a band. I use band 1, my neighbor uses band 6, and so on and so forth. What we use to access for wireless access is called access point, or AP. You may hear that abbreviation. And you have to bear in mind that even though wireless communication is quite prevalent, it's limited in range. So if somebody wants to launch an attack from a different nation, from a different country, they cannot attack wirelessly. They have to go through the wires to have more impact. So even though wireless is a very open medium that can be unsecure, there's also some protection into the fact that the range is limited. A wireless frame is quite different than an Ethernet frame, which is the equivalent layer 2 frame that we have in wired networks. And one of the big differences is the fields, the different fields. We have the field called to-DS and from-DS that indicates direction to or from an access point. Also, there may be fragmentation, bits and other things like that. The thing with wireless is that it works a lot in a broadcast manner. Your wireless access point, your wireless router, is sending beacons constantly to advertise that the network is accepting connections, and your host, your network interface card host, replies with the authentication, and then there is an established connection after you associate with the host, and then you're a trusted host to connect to the network. You may have heard of this SSID term. This is the name of your wireless network, identifies the wireless access point, and it stands for Service Set Identifiers. And in general, your wireless network keeps broadcasting consistently, and also your wireless card keeps looking for this wireless network consistently. And there's some interesting attacks to that. So, for example, if my Mac is always broadcasting and trying to find my home network name, which I'm not going to tell you what my home network name is, somebody could lure my Mac to connect to a network that has the same name, but it's not my home network. So there's an issue with that. But overall, the protocol works very well, and of course your computer should have its own mechanisms not to trust, and you should defend your computer not to trust any rogue access point that may be broadcasting and inviting your computer to connect to it. When we think about wireless security, we need to think about the pillars of security: confidentiality, which points us to encryption, and we have already discussed about stream ciphers used in wireless. And then we think about integrity. There could be loss of the signal, but also somebody in the middle, a man in the middle wireless attack that tampers with our data, pretends to be us, or gets in the middle between our host and our access point. And these are very viable type of attacks. Again, short range, because wireless has a specific range, but still they have some impact. And finally, availability. That may even depend on the equipment and interference, and there may be loss of signal and loss of service. What we need to pay a lot of attention to is these public wireless networks that we're all logging into, and there's no encryption in those networks. Anybody can join and could perform a man-in-the-middle attack, and we need to be very diligent with these public wireless networks and protect our computers. Personally, I do not connect to wireless networks that are public anymore. I use my phone or a hotspot and never connect to a public network. Now, I understand that this is a convenience that we all need to use. However, it's a convenience that is very much taken advantage of, so we need to be very aware, very, very diligent, and also inform our families and friends about these public wireless networks, that they can be tampered with, and there can be a lot of stealing of information. So to enumerate the Wi-Fi vulnerabilities as they are listed in your book, which is a really good chapter to read on. The first one is unauthorized access. So as we discussed in the previous slide, anybody can join a wireless network that is open on campus. We allow to bring your own device, and any access point may accept an association with any device. There are also protocol vulnerabilities. The wireless medium is prone to eavesdropping. There can be beacon pickups, like when somebody goes around and picks AP access point broadcasts. Then there could be stealing of the signal. You could have your internet being stolen by your neighbor, for example, because they can pick the SSID of your network. Of course, you can fix this by having authentication, strong authentication in your network. But also another bad thing that could happen is that you could have the SSID of your network stolen. That is because also your host that has connected to your home network keeps looking for that home network wherever it goes, and this way you reveal the SSID, and then there can be rogue access points that try to lure your host, your computer or your phone, to connect to them. There are ways to resolve these issues in the protocol, and we're trying to redesign it to just share a data value for association, or use only authenticated devices to access specific access points. Now, another big issue with wireless is MAC spoofing. And that is, anybody can fake a MAC address. Again, this is a limited attack. You gotta be within the range, but anybody can fake that they have the MAC address of my computer and pretend to be me. There is no communication between the operating system and the hardware to verify that this is a Mac. So you could have a PC and pretend to have my Mac, for example. And Mac spoofing can be fairly easily done. It's not a long-range and large impact attack, but it's still an attack that can happen. And finally, stealing the association in free Wi-Fi. We can pick unencrypted cookies and steal somebody's session. Again, that also has to do with websites that don't encrypt their cookies. That's partially fault of the application layer, not just the wireless layer. And then you also need to look at these preferred associations that we have talked about, like my computer always looking for my home network SSID, and my phone trying to connect to an SSID that it recognizes, and then do not allow your phone to automatically connect to any network that it picks up. Have it ask for approval. It is inconvenient, and do not allow your computer to do that. It is inconvenient to have default approval mode. You would rather immediately connect to your wireless, but security is usually not about convenience, so we need to make this type of sacrifices to secure our devices. I will conclude this wireless security video by talking a little bit about the details of WEP and WPA, the two prevalent protocols of wireless, as they are also discussed towards the end of chapter 6.3 on wireless network security. So WEP, or Wired Equivalent Privacy, is the least used nowadays protocol because it has several issues. So in the case of WEP, how it works first. The access point sends a random number to the client encrypts it with a shared key and returns a ciphertext to the access point, and then the access point authenticates the client, and then secure communication can happen. But WEP is using very weak encryption, very small keys of 64 to 128 bits. It's also using static keys for encryption, which is not a good thing. We've already discussed about stream ciphers and static keys and how these static keys do not help at all. The key can be brute forced because it's a weak encrypted key and a weak encryption algorithm, and the weak encryption algorithm is based on this ciphertext that is the stream encryption that we have already discussed, even though there are initial values, they may collide, they may start repeating. So that's another issue with WEP, WEP. It also has faulty integrity check. So attackers can recalculate the fault the integrity check, and again perform the type of man-in-the-middle attacks. And it can also mess up with authentication. It can have no authentication. The attacker can fake the SSID and the MAC address, and there's no way to authenticate those. So WEP is very unsecure. It has been tested, retested, and it's not used nowadays. Unfortunately, still some obsolete networks are using WEP, but more and more you see around the world that WEP is not used because of all of these issues. WPA, on the other hand, is actually the most secure and most prevalent type of protocol that we're using nowadays. And in this case, the big security is based on good encryption. So in the case of WPA, the access point does not send a static number to create a key, but it sends a nonce, a number that will never be used, and it's a random number. And this is a very difficult, this makes it very difficult to break the key and break the encryption of WPA. And as you can see over here, there is a whole handshake, a whole very, very well thought type of protocol that involves the sending of these nonce and creating a shared key between the access point and the client. The access point is your wireless router, the client is your computer. So the strengths of WPA over web are that there's no static encryption key. Obviously, there's what you may have heard of as TKIP, temporal key integrity program, where the key is changed in each packet, so no key reusal. There's also extensible authentication protocol and authentication by password and certificate. You may notice, for example, that because the school network is a WPA network, when your certificate expires, you're not allowed to connect to the school network. This is that certificate that protects our network. So there's also strong encryption. WPA uses AES. There is integrity protection with good CRC, cyclic redundancy codes, and all of these great things. But the big thing with WPA is that they used the mistakes of the past, the mistakes at web, to improve upon, especially the faulty security and the bad habits of reusing keys. Now, even WPA is not completely secure, and there's a fairly new attack. It came out a couple of years ago, where there could be a type of a man-in-the-middle type of attack, and the key of WPA could be reinstalled. It's a quite sophisticated attack. I welcome you to look into the website. They also have videos demonstrating the attack. It's quite sophisticated, but it does go to show that we need to keep being inventive in how we create protocols and how we defend against those. I'm not going to be asking you for the details of this attack. I'm just mentioning it because it's a very interesting type of attack that you may want to go into a little further. But the next slide is not included. It's just for fun if you would like to learn more about this very new, hot, off the press attack.